Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Tokaido, and specifically the new edition of Tokaido, and our copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
And Tokaido is a 1 to 5 player game designed by Antoine Bauza, and you are travelers going from Kyoto to Edo. Let's take a look at how it plays.
You start the game with a traveler, a few coins, and the long road to Edo waiting ahead. On your turn, you can move as many spaces as you want as long as you stop at the next inn, and then you take the action of whatever space you stopped on. These include the shop, which lets you buy items that you want to collect into sets, the farm, which gives you 3 coins, the temple, which lets you donate coins for immediate and endgame points, the hot springs, which gives you either 2 or 3 points, panoramas, which let you add to one of 3 different vistas, encounters, which provide a random effect based on the other locations, and finally inns, which work like checkpoints and let you buy food for points. After a player takes a turn, whoever's the farthest behind will go next, and this will continue until everyone stops at the last inn in Edo, at which point you score for the temple and for final achievement cards for most shop items, most hot springs, most souvenirs, and the most expensive meal. And then the greatest traveler is named.
So that was the overview of how to play, and the core part of the game is really the movement system and choosing how far you want to go on your turn. Because you can go like way ahead, you only have to stop at the inn. So you're choosing like, do I just go to the next available space or do I want to jump ahead?
Yeah, and in our first games, we really thought, well, let's just go to the next available space. And I bet a lot of people do that too, because you think, I'm just going to take as many turns as I possibly can. And that kind of works at first, I guess, if like everyone does that. But pretty soon you realize, like within a few games really, that there's a lot more to it than that. Sometimes it really is smart to jump ahead and to like focus on places or to take places away from other people, and that pace becomes a bit more interesting.
Yeah, there will definitely be some spaces that you want to make sure you land on. Like one of the spaces might be the space where you get 3 coins, because money can be really tight. And at the end of each round, you stop at the inn, and you're really going to want to make sure you can afford the food there, because that's worth 6 points, which is a decent amount of points.
Oh yeah, 6 points is a huge chunk. You really need to get the meals at each one. And it's tricky because if you get to that inn last, you have last choice of the food. And the food ranges from $1 to $3, which is a huge range in this, because usually I've got like $2 to $4 in my bank at any one time. So it can be a thought of, do I jump ahead to that inn to get cheap food? Or more often, do I jump ahead to those money spaces? And Jess often will try and block those money spaces, but what can happen is one person's blocking the money spaces, then the other person's blocking the buying stuff spaces, and just like, fine, have all that money, but you can't do anything with it. And so I like that part of this game too, that there are these really different routes.
Yeah, and I think it took us a few games before we really realized that there were a few different routes. And sometimes it's even just doing a little bit of certain things. I will say that if you are collecting panoramas, you want to try and finish at least one of them, because the last panorama card is worth the most points. And if you can finish first, it's worth even more. So you'll certainly, if you got a choice of a couple panorama spaces, be going for the one that may finish it up.
Yeah, the big one, the sky one, or the sea one. The sea is, the last card really is worth 8 points. So that's a ton of points. But also, like, the item sets are worth quite a bit, and it's worth sometimes just getting the spa cards, which are that's just free points. So you don't need to spend any money. It's no like building up to anything. It's the same thing too with the gifts, which just kind of give you something from one of the other things. You're not sure what it is, but again, it's just a free bonus, and both the spa and they're not, it's souvenirs. those are both worth 3 points at the end of the game for whoever has the most. So you do want to be looking at what other people have all of the time.
Yeah, you're very much evaluating that to see if maybe you can beat them to the panorama card or have the most of something in comparison, or just block the space that they desperately want. And it is tricky though, because if you really want to block a space, you may jump too far ahead, and then the other player may get to take like multiple turns before it's your turn again.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to talk about here, and let's just jump into player count. But I think for player count, one of the key things is just how much that dynamic changes. Because if you're playing this at 3 to 5 players, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people on that road. And there's going to be more people to possibly push, or you're just going to be, like, you're going to sometimes be forced to jump ahead a bit. Although at 4 and 5, that extra space opens up, so there kind of is a bit more space. But at 3, I think that's really where, like, it feels really tight in there, and you really do need to jump ahead to make sure you get the stuff you want to get.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think 3 is the tightest because you don't have that second option that presents itself for some of the spaces. But it does feel different at all the various player counts. In particular, at 2 players, which is the player count we've played the most, because there is a 2-player variant. And how that works is there's another pawn of a different color, and whoever's furthest ahead on the track gets to then place that pawn, which is really interesting at a 2-player game because you will often use that pawn to block a space that your opponent might want.
You'll exclusively use that pawn to block. The pawn just becomes a jerk. They're like the jerkiest possible player. They don't get any points. All they're doing is blocking each other. And it does make it a little bit more worthwhile of pushing the pace a bit, because then you take over that pawn and you can stop the other player from stopping at each one of those spaces. And so I do like that. The 2-player game almost feels like the meanest version of this game because you get to move that third kind of bot player.
Yeah, you are very much paying attention to what your opponent has and specifically trying to stop them. Whereas at more players, you're not going to be paying as close attention necessarily to what everybody has and what everyone's doing.
So the solo mode is the main addition to the Stonemaier version of this game, and that's made by Atomic Factory, and it's run by a deck of cards, and it's fairly simple. You're playing against 2 bots. Every time it's one of their turns, you're going to flip a card. That card's going to dictate how far they can move. Then where they stop is decided by how many cards they have in each one of their rows. So as they go, they're going to make these columns. And whichever column they have the most cards in, that's going to be their preference, because they're going to score for how tall that column is. So if they put their 5th card, they get 5 points. It's pretty simple, but it means that you can kind of see what they're aiming at, like you would with a human player. You would see, oh, they're going to focus on getting the different goods or items, whatever the black cards are. So you can see that that's what they're doing. And so you can kind of think about where they might go. But sometimes they're a little bit tricky too, and they move to the money spaces or the temple spaces, or they even rush ahead to the inn. And so I think they're very, very low maintenance, but it does kind of play like a game. And we found that it's interesting as well to use it 2 players. So I like this very simple version where you use that bot to just move back, or not bot, but use that kind of dummy player. But this makes it really feel like kind of a 4-player game.
Yeah, it is interesting playing with them in a 2-player game and making it feel like a 4-player game. They are a bit more upkeep, but not too much more. And I think one of the key interesting parts is the temple, because I do think the temple at 2 players isn't that interesting because you can pretty easily get 1st or 2nd.
Yeah, and one of them whooped us that. They had so many on that temple, but they're actually pretty competitive too. I found this in both the solo and the 2-player. The solo, I think I just barely beat it. The 2-player, one of them tied you for 2nd place overall, but they were pushing pretty well. And there is also a deck that changes their difficulty as well, that just kind of,
It's really simple. It just gives them an extra one of the cards in each one of those columns, and you can add them to like each column if you want. You can randomize that as well. They've got extra cards that do that. So you can raise that difficulty, but even at like the lowest difficulty, they were definitely a challenge.
So let's move on to components, and there are a few differences with this version, but if you're not familiar with Tokaido, it is the same art, and that is a selling point. It all looks lovely. The board is really nice and clean, but has really good visuals. The cards all look like really pretty, and it is part of the journey is you're collecting these like memories of Japan. So it is really nice that the cards look so lovely.
Yeah, I think that's always been such a selling point of Tokaido, is the look of Tokaido has been such a big reason why it's sold so many copies. And this version does have a few little tweaks. So I think one of the, and I have not played the original version, so I've read this on the internet, but I know one of the complaints from the earlier ones are that the panorama cards were a little bit lower quality, I believe, and they may have been a different shape, I'm not positive, but those now have been kind of knocked up a level. All of the card quality here is really nice. Really, there's not a big problem with any of the components. There's also a little bit more clarity, whereas it used to just be the icons. Now there is some writing on some of those cards that just need a little bit more to it. So there's some stuff for the end game goals, also for the different characters on the back of all of those. It explains what it does on the front.
Yeah, although I will say I really appreciate the simplicity of the board, but we found that where you're supposed to actually stop is a little bit confusing. And so we prefer to stop a little bit above the space, and it's so minor, but it, like, for something that should be really intuitive, we definitely got that wrong our first few plays.
Yeah, if you've seen the photos, that this whole time we're always standing right on the icon, because that just made sense to me. Apparently you're supposed to stand on the little dots that are in between. We just never did that, and it feels a bit too jumbled when you do that. there's a dot for the 4 and 5 players. There you can have 2 people on the road, and then there's a dot that's a little bit lower down. But I like to stand on the icon. You know what? I'm just going to keep on doing that. But I think in general, it's fairly easy to see everything. There is also a little bit sometimes between the panoramas, especially the one with the snow and the one with the ocean, or the mountains and the ocean. Those 2 icons I really have to like take a close look at, and the hot tub gets a bit mixed in with those. I think you get used to it, but your first few games, I do think you're gonna have to like really take a close look at the board.
And I also really like that the character cards have a hole in them that lets you put your player color in. And speaking of those characters, it's interesting, it gives each player a like asymmetric power, and that's going to make the game feel different every time you play for every character you are.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of replayability just because of that, because those powers are fairly strong, and often I think we feel like, I think this one's broken, but I don't think I would be interested to see kind of what people think is that tier list of those different characters, but it is interesting because some of them give you like the food cheaper, or they make the souvenirs feel a lot better, or all the different aspects of the game.
Yeah, and some of them are very much tie to a specific place as well. And the tricky thing with those ones is other players may block you out from going to those spaces at all. So that can feel pretty tough though if you're somebody that your specific thing is you get a bonus every time you get to choose souvenirs, and if everybody else is making sure you don't ever get to visit the souvenir place, that can feel tough.
Yeah, it just brings this up because this is what I did to our last game. I was just like, you know what, you're just not going to do that. That is just part of the game, and that is also part of that strategy, and that is kind of when it started to feel more interesting to us as well, is that like realization of I can block someone from this, and then they've got to change the thing that they're doing, but also in blocking them, I'm now not doing the thing I'm supposed to do, so I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot, because you did win that game even though my plan was to be such a jerk, it ended up backfiring against me.
Yeah, that is true. It isn't always to your advantage to block the other player. And the different characters also come with different amounts of starting money. And usually if your power maybe doesn't feel as strong, you typically start with more money, which is a pretty big advantage as well. And so it is interesting because it does, I feel like, drive you to try different things every time you play because you'll want to play into your character power. So for final thoughts, really this is a gateway game. This is very much for people who are relatively new to board games. It has a lot of things that gateway games have. It has like very quick rules to explain. It looks very nice on the table, like the whiteboard and the clean icons. I think invite a lot of people in.
Yeah, I think people are definitely going to come in because of the look of this game, because of the theme of this game, and just how it's kind of a simple introduction to worker placement. There is like a bit more in there, and I think even for board gamers who have played a lot more games, it is still just kind of like a nice, casual, kind of chill game. I don't think anyone's going to get too intense in this. There is interaction, but none of it is particularly mean, except maybe sometimes going somewhere where someone specifically wants to go, but that's a big part of the game. And because that's happening almost every turn, you're not going to get too hurt about that as well.
Yeah, so if you're more experienced, I could see it being more of like a filler game, something you might play before a heavier game, for sure. And I don't know if this is the first one to introduce kind of the moving down a path system, but it is, I think, one of the most popular ones.
Yeah, I think this system had definitely happened before. I think Kalis maybe does a similar thing, and then it's happened since as well, stuff like Parks and First Rat, but this one is one of the more famous versions of that, and I think this is really one of those. It came out in like 2010 or 2012 or something, and I think this has been a bit established as one of those core gateway games, a little bit like Ticket to Ride, like Stone Age, like Lords of Waterdeep, or Carcassonne. It kind of falls within that category.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add in terms of the Stonemaier version, if you already have the older version of Tokaido, really the key difference is those Atoma cards that let you play solo or add in bots for 2 players. And I think those are even produced separately, so you could just get it as a separate pack. But I think if you do own the other one, this doesn't add that much to make it a different game.
Yeah, but I think if you don't have Tokaido at all, this is definitely the version to pick up because the component's just a little bit nicer. It's a little bit more accessible, and accessibility really is kind of the thing with this game. I think this game is going to be the best fit for newer players, for families. It does a great job of bringing people in with that theme, with the aesthetic of everything, and just how easy it is to pick up.
But if you are a more experienced gamer and you're playing with those newer gamers, I think you'll still get something out of it.
And that is it. That is Tokaido. Have you played the new version of Tokaido? Have you played the old version of Tokaido? Have you played Tokaido with solo or 2-player with the bots like us? Please let us know in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.